So just so you know, there was a call to the police indicating a tip that they saw a pregnant lady being thrown into a van. Okay.
Yeah.
Van,
so all of this points to the van.
Right.
And if that's the case, it points away from Scott Peterson.
100%.
I
mean, if you found Laci's blood there, it's game over for the prosecution. The Innocence Project is saying, wait a second, you guys got it wrong. You relied on 2 meth addicts to give you the timeline. What about the van? How come you didn't check? Oh, because they told you so? The meth addicts told you they didn't do it?
Yeah. 12 peers, 12 random people have to agree he murdered his wife and child. They were convinced.
Yeah, but you know what? Since 2020, 375 people have been freed by the Innocence Project.
For murder?
For murder. On death row, half of them. And the jury were convinced. Yeah. And this motion is either going to expose the biggest crack in the criminal justice system that I've seen in a very long time, or Scott's guilty.
Yeah. So let's jump into the Scott Peterson case. Okay. Some new revelations as of late? What's going on?
So there's something called the Innocence Project.
Yes.
And the Innocence Project is an organization that was founded years ago by 2 attorneys. One was Barry Schecht. The other one was Paul Neufeld. 2 attorneys from New York.
How cool.
Barry Schecht worked on O.J. Simpson.
I remember.
He was the cutting edge technology back then to bring in DNA.
Mm-hmm.
So they formed this organization at the Cardozo Law School where people donate their time to free people that are innocent. They've freed just in 2020, since 2020, 375 innocent people.
Wow.
More than half were on death row. They would have been killed.
Wow.
There's a statistic that shows that there's about 2%, or approximately there could be 2% of innocent people in prison, which would come out to be about 20,000 people that are innocent in prison.
Is there a calculation in the law on how many percentage we're willing to deal with? We know it's never going to be 0. It's not a perfect system. I mean, do we have in legal jurisprudence and ethics, I don't remember learning about it, but do we have some kind of is there a threshold where this many innocents is okay? Because we do need to lock up the bad guys.
Not in the Constitution that I read, not in the United States Constitution.
I didn't expect an actual answer either. Yeah. I don't know, but it's weird. It's that morality thing. You're not going to have 0.
Okay. So let me tell you how this works, because I've been doing criminal defense for almost 25 years. Every case is almost like a cancer case. It's a legal cancer case. You have to identify what the problem is. You have to see if you could cure the problem. In the Scott Peterson case, the problem was that Laci went missing. And they didn't know why she didn't come back. According to Scott Peterson, he gave, depending on what you believe, he gave different accounts. And I think
I want to recap.
Yeah.
Let's go back.
Okay.
Many people don't remember the case well. We were younger. It was the 80s or 90s when the case was big.
2002.
No, 2002. Sorry.
Yeah, so 2002, she disappeared. A pregnant lady disappeared.
Okay, but
her name was Laci Peterson.
Laci Peterson.
Yeah.
I just remember the face on the TV. Like, she was a good-looking housewife, I guess. I don't know.
Yes.
Pregnant young lady, married to Scott Peterson, good, dashing guy.
Fertilizer salesman. He was very successful. They had a nice house.
I could see how he would be a good salesman. He had a good-looking smile. He's a good-looking dude, right? And charming.
If you say so.
Well, he seems like it. I mean, I'll have to get confirmation from other people.
I'll ask my wife.
Yes. So it's 2003?
2002.
2002, I believe, Christmas Eve.
Yes.
We don't know if it's Christmas Eve. It's the very next day. So let's say Christmas Day, from the facts I was recapping. Correct me if I'm wrong, but let me get them out. It was Christmas Day, and Laci should have been at home. Her family member or somebody, you're going to correct me, but some confidant, friend, or family of the Peterson couple, Laci, Scott, and their unborn child, Cameron, I believe, somebody came over to the house. As they came over to the house, they saw that the dog, Laci and Scott's dog, was running out in front of the lawn or in the street. Kind of weird. The dog shouldn't be out. They grabbed the dog. They brought the dog back. Noticed that there was an opening to the home. Maybe the front door was open. Not sure. They brought the dog inside. Could not find Laci. So this is the morning. It's, I think, around 10:30 a.m. They can't find Laci. They're like, where is Laci? What's going on? Where is Scott? Well, they had heard that Scott was going to go fishing. So it turns out that Scott had gone fishing that morning. Laci's missing, the unborn child, of course, missing. So I think they call 911. So this family member calls 911, reports Laci missing. Scott isn't around. He's presumably on a boat fishing in the South San Francisco Bay. And that's what the facts that I picked up. And then it turned out that all suspicion slowly started to lie with Scott. What do you mean he was fishing? Could that be a front? Did he do something to his wife and his unborn child, right? I'm just trying to take us back to the mystery of what this was when we first heard about it, the Scott Peterson murder trial, right? Suddenly it's like he's on trial. He didn't just go fishing. He decided to kill his wife and unborn child. He's a family annihilator. And he then used this fishing trip as a mask to cover up, even get rid of her, get rid of the evidence. This is what we remember of the Scott Peterson trial, right?
Right.
He came into the courtroom. He looked kind of like very stoic. The media, I think, turned against him. They're like, of course he did this. He killed his wife. And I don't know. I kind of forgot, like everybody else, we forgot about the case. I mean, he was tried and convicted, right?
Right.
Why are we talking about it again?
Because if he's proven innocent, this would show that this is the biggest mess up in United States criminal history, in my opinion.
Holy shit. I mean,
you would see the worst injustice that I've ever heard of.
That would
in my
mean
career.
that what we thought was a monstrous murder of his own wife and unborn child, and we sent to prison for now 20 years, was actually an innocent man.
That's a big if, though. We could talk about that. I have a little bit of doubt. I have some theories about why this is all happening. None of this makes sense to me. A lot of commentators truly believe that there was guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. But as a criminal defense attorney, I always leave an open mind to say maybe there's a possibility we didn't get it right. Because in this investigation, a former investigator said they didn't do a lot of the stuff they were supposed to do. There was a lot of sloppy investigation. The police department, actually the prosecutor's department, held back evidence. If you read the motion, there's a plethora of things that went wrong in this case. Not a proper investigation. There was a burglary that happened across the street in a Medina house, across Laci Peterson's house. There was a burglary going on. Allegedly, witnesses saw her being confronting the burglars.
Is this new evidence?
This is something that was raised in the first trial. We've always known about the Medina burglary. There was a burglary, but
is Medina the street they lived on?
Yeah, Medina is the residence where across the street from the Petersons, and two people over there, two burglars, did actually burglarize the place. But what's interesting is
the house across the street from the Petersons.
What's interesting is,
are you talking about the morning of the alleged kidnapping? I mean, the day that Laci disappeared, you're saying there was a burglary across the street.
Well, allegedly there was a burglary at the same day on Christmas Eve where she went missing.
Christmas
Eve, not day. Okay. She went missing on Christmas Eve. And on Christmas Eve, they saw her, the house being burglarized. Many neighbors, many people said, we saw her approach. We saw somebody grab her and take her in a van.
Orange van.
And the van now is burnt. And now they're thinking, well, why didn't you look at the van? Why didn't you, see whether these burglars killed him? Because it's always been the contention of Scott Peterson's case. He didn't do it. It was somebody else that did it.
Yeah, he has maintained his innocence throughout.
Yeah.
His innocence.
The reason why, let's just say hypothetically he's found innocent, okay? The reason why he was arrested is because he did not act as though a person who may have lost his wife acted.
I mean, how are you supposed to act?
That's the point.
Who prescribes how you're supposed to act?
That's the point. So there was a psychologist I listened to that talked about this and how there's no police training regarding this. There's no psychology training. Everybody acts differently. And some people, you may act suspiciously in my eyes, but in reality, I don't have anything to check that against.
You might not know how to act, and you're trying to act in a way that you think you're supposed to act, and you come off as an unnatural idiot.
Not only that, but I have nothing to compare how you're acting now to how you've acted before. I have no comparison to. So how can I make the call that you're acting suspicious?
Now, I remember the footage of him when the case first came around and it was in the media,
right.
and his defense attorney is the highly accomplished Mark Garagos. Mm-hmm. And there was footage of him in a deposition or in the court. There was footage of Scott giving his statement. You're saying he seemed a little too calm.
Okay, so he did a lot of things that went contrary to what a normal person would do. But keep in mind, he's still innocent at this point, right? When you're being investigated. What did he do that was strange? Let's call it strange things. First thing is he didn't want to talk to the police. He was very elusive. He wanted to get a lawyer before he talked to the police.
Hold on. This is RJ Manuelian 101. I mean, this is what you do. You don't talk to the police and you get a lawyer, right?
Well, most people don't react that way. Most people, when they lose their wife, like if you lost your wife, the first thing the police would come, you wouldn't say, well, I'm not, you wouldn't be cagey. You wouldn't be answering questions in a strange way. Plus, additionally, he gave information that wasn't correct, inconsistent facts. First, he said he was going golfing. Then he said he was going fishing. And then they found out about an affair that he had, and that completely changed
flipped everybody. That changed everything.
I think that's where they thought that's the reason why he may have been involved,
because the missing element,
the
right. Motive.
And by the way, that's why Mark Garagos, who's the defense attorney, said, and I completely agree with him, that this was nothing more than a character assassination. Mm-hmm. If you didn't like Scott Peterson, he said it during his closing argument, they wanted you to convict him because you don't like him. Mm-hmm. I remember that. I followed that case very carefully. So yes, he was a horrible husband. He made that argument. But does that mean that he killed him?
Of course not.
But the problem is he did say some things that made him look suspicious, whether consciously or unconsciously. For example, when he was talking to Amber Fry, the girl that he was cheating on Laci with, he used Laci's name in past tense before he even knew she was gone.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So they're saying that, why that's a slip up,
like
a Freudian
Laci
slip.
was this,
yeah,
was
like
that.
She's gone. Yes, I think was some past tense.
But he didn't yet have allegedly heard of the news that
That's right. That's right. And also, he was a very good liar. He lied a lot during, I think, Laci's memorial. He called Amber, which was a very heartless thing to do, and said he was in France watching fireworks or something. So he's not a nice guy.
Sure.
I mean, even if he's innocent, I'm going to go on the record saying this guy's not a nice guy. I would not have him in my house.
He's not a Boy Scout.
Right.
He's got a wife and kid on the way.
Terrible what he did, the relationship that he carried, but he's not, what the Innocence Project is saying, is not a murderer because you didn't go and check the van, which had blood on the towel, which had blood on the mattress. You guys didn't check all this stuff out. And how can you convict a guy that you didn't check to see whether these things were verified? Because if it was Laci's blood, game over, right?
There's an alternate theory there where it's like, there's burglars breaking into a home. Laci happens to be out walking her dog.
Right.
She witnesses something she shouldn't have witnessed. And they're like, oh my God, this lady just saw us. What do? They grab her, throw in the orange van, take her away, kill her.
I'm only laughing because I think that's an unlikely scenario.
But then the dog's running around in the street. That is what the family member said when they first arrived at the Peterson residence.
Yes, but
why was the dog out in the street?
It could have ran, maybe the door was left open. Maybe hypothetically the prosecution could say Scott left it open. I have no idea. But what's strange to me is that I've never heard of, doing this 25 years, a burglary being escalated into a kidnapping, homicide, and then mayhem, and then burning a body. It's really rare. It's like Ted Bundy. You don't hear about somebody killing 21 different people.
I see what you're saying. You mean the two burglars who were there to break into a house were not likely to have then mentally gone to the point where they're going to abduct, kidnap this pregnant lady, kill her and the unborn child.
Just to disclose a burglary, which they probably could go to probation, get probation on anyway, or some sort of low prison sentence in the worst case scenario.
And they're such criminal masterminds, get this part, that they wait 4 months with the decaying body of this lady and child, and then somehow find out that Scott's story involves fishing in the San Francisco Bay and go dump the body in the San Francisco Bay.
And coincidentally, Scott looked up on Google how to research that, certain inculpatory evidence regarding where the body was. So it would all have to be very, very coincidental, including finding the body where Scott was, 90 miles, where Scott was fishing. His boat was exactly where they found the body, 90 miles. All that
means the real killers would have had to known where he was fishing and dump the body there.
Right.
Is there any nexus by which we think they conceivably could have known where he was fishing?
I don't know. These people were, his name is Stephen Todd and Dodd Glenn Pierce. They were both given polygraph examinations, which is what the Innocence Project wants to see. They want to see the results. That was never disclosed. Additionally, what's interesting is, I'll tell you one thing that really stuck in my head. The Innocence Project said, completely true, if the timeline is off, if she didn't die on Christmas Eve, then it's entirely possible that that they are lying, that she could have been alive, that
The morning after he left.
Connor, when the pathologist testified to the death, apparently now he's taking it back, saying he did it wrong. The science was wrong. The baby could have been a different age. So the point I was trying to make is that they relied on the timeline of these two burglars who were on methamphetamine. And the Innocence Project said, you relied on two meth addicts to tell you what the timeline was? Why the hell would you do that? Because meth addicts don't know what the timeline is. They're up 24/7.
So the two burglars.
So they relied on the burglars' information to develop the timeline, Tony.
Those burglars
Were on meth.
Were on meth, and they were known to the original criminal prosecution?
Yes.
And how come the defense didn't find out about them, or did they?
They did. They knew about him.
The jury hear about that?
No. I think that, and again, it's been a while. I think they mentioned it at some point in the trial, but they never. Stephen Todd or Dodd Glenn Pierce were never summoned to court. Okay. They were never testified.
It seems like it would have helped the defense, and I'm sure Mark Garagos brought a vigorous, incredible defense. So why wasn't that put in front of the jury?
I think it was put in front of the jury, but I would guess that these two would obviously get lawyered up and not take the Fifth Amendment anyway. I don't think Mark compelled these people to testify, even if they wanted to, unless they get immunity. From the prosecutor, I don't think the prosecutor was going to give that.
Right.
So they trusted this timeline, and if the timeline is wrong, then Laci wasn't killed on December 24th.
She conceivably could have died the morning of the 24th.
Or maybe they did kidnap her, hold her, and then decided by theory just to kill her. Or maybe it was a soft kill where they had her in a van, there was a mattress there, and maybe they just smothered her. But what they're looking at, Tony, there's going to be two pieces of evidence. If Scott Peterson is guilty, it's going to come out of two pieces of evidence. One, it's going to be a towel with some blood that was attached to the gas tank in the back, according to the motion, and blood that was in the mattress in the van.
So it's one or the other, right?
Well, assuming...
Which gas tank are we talking about?
The van, the orange van
so
gas
all
tank.
of this points to the van.
Right.
And if that's the case, it points away from Scott Peterson.
Yes,
it's
that would be the argument.
Exonerating evidence.
100%.
I
mean, if you found Laci's blood there, it's game over for the prosecution.
Have you looked through the facts and sort of the defense from the original case? I mean, do you feel like he should have been convicted? Because it seemed like the defense did a masterful job. I was just looking into it, and it seemed like there were a couple pieces of evidence, one of which seemed to indicate Scott had spent some time with Laci that morning of the 24th before he went fishing, sitting on the couch, watching Martha Stewart, watching a cooking show. And that Scott had testified, the authorities probably asked him, I'm sort of like getting off track here, correct me, but like, what was in the cooking show if you guys were watching a show? And he said, like, I remember it was Martha Stewart and she was cooking some lemon meringue or meringue of some sort. And then the prosecutors came during trial pretty hard against Scott and alleged to the jury that that's just factually untrue, that there was not a Martha Stewart show like that on at that morning where they discussed meringues. Scott, I guess that's a hit for Scott Peterson during the trial, except for the defense attorney, Mark Garagos, flipped that during trial and opened, I believe, his closing statement, or at least part of his presentation to the jury, with an actual replay of the episode with Martha Stewart talking about meringues, okay, with her guest, where they literally show her go, yeah, what are we going to do? Oh, we're going to cook up some meringues. Okay, so you guys are wrong, prosecution. Like, there was such a show. Scott's not lying. He could have sat there with Laci and watched that. Yeah, that was one.
But yeah, that's one. But that's not big enough.
Okay, there was another one, which was that
these are small jabs.
A Google search was revealed to have taken place,
right,
or some kind of a computer search from the computer at the Petersons' home the morning of the 24th, right, searching for a umbrella of some sort in a sunflower pattern. This is where you realize, oh, Laci loved sunflower patterns, and there's pictures of a dress that she wore with a sunflower pattern, and she was maybe looking for an umbrella. She liked umbrellas of some sort. could that show that Laci was home the morning of the 24th?
Well, it's not up to the defense counsel to prove the case. It's up to the prosecution to prove the case. You're shifting the burden. You're saying, shouldn't the defense have proven? It's not our job to prove anything.
No, I'm helping the defense. I'm saying these two pieces of evidence seem like, to me, Scott's not lying.
Well, I think what's the most important evidence is if there's Laci Peterson's blood in that van with either Stephen Todd or Glenn Pierce, and then it's game over.
But can we even find that out? I mean, the van's been burned.
Well, apparently they're going to try.
Okay. I guess you can probably still find pieces of mattress.
They're going to try. And
try to get DNA out of that?
Yeah. I did.
That would be...
This is an attempt, by the way. So number one is they got to get the order from the judge. The judge gives them the right. It doesn't mean automatically Scott's going to be discovered to be innocent. They still have to see whether or not they could get the DNA, whether the DNA is compromised. And then aside from Laci Peterson's DNA, who else is there? Because if it's Scott Peterson's DNA on that mattress with Laci, then that doesn't help Scott.
No.
It's got to be a third party, right?
Right.
Now, there's something called cross.
It's not going to be Scott Peterson in the orange
but
van.
It could be. There could be Scott. There could be Stephen Todd Pierce, and there could be Laci. There could be 3 DNAs. It's called cross-reference DNA. It's basically if Scott touched something that was on Laci at the time, if he gave her a hug, then his DNA would be there.
True, and he wasn't in the van.
Right, but they would exclude that. They would know because a third party would be there as well. So it would be Pierce, it would be Peterson and his wife. They would exclude the husband because obviously the third party would be the more culpable.
I'm assuming there's a magnitude difference of the quantity of DNA if it's you there, first person, versus if you carried it from a hug. From somebody. There's got to be some 10.
Yes, there'll be a huge difference in DNA
decimal
levels.
Points. Decimal points different.
Yeah. So I think going back to your sunflower and all that, to me, the cannon or the nuclear bomb is the blood. All you got to do is go check the blood.
Okay, but let's go back.
Forget about everything else.
As you pointed out, the burden is not on you.
Right.
The burden is not on the defense.
Right.
It's not on Mark Giragos. But I just pointed out 2 pretty compelling pieces of evidence to my mind. How did the jury find him guilty?
Well, the jury found him guilty on several ways. The boat was where he was fishing. Okay, that's a big wow. What a coincidence.
The boat, he was in the boat.
The boat where he said he was fishing was the same place where they found the body, 90 miles from his house.
Right.
Is that a coincidence? Can you swallow that coincidence? And then they found...
If that happens to be the biggest body of water around, I could see 2 independent thinkers coming up with the idea, that's where I'm going to go to drop off a body.
And then they had remnants of cement on his boat. Then...
What does that mean?
They had some sort of, cement is powder. So they had some sort of residue of cement in the boat. In the boat that Scott was in. Right,
what's the theory?
The theory is that he weighed him down with cement blocks to put him on the bottom. She sunk the body.
Got it.
And but
was there any cement blocks found?
I don't recall. Something weighed it down. I'm not sure
because a torso showed up decaying.
I'm not sure, but here are the holes in the case. It's been a long time.
And can I ask why God? This is horrifying to talk about, but why did the baby and the mother wash ashore separately? She was a pregnant woman.
I can't tell you about that. I'm not a
I don't get that part.
But what's interesting is that the baby, so he was there. You asked me before. He was there 90 miles away. He gave inconsistent statements. He was having an affair.
Could it be a coincidence that the body washed up there at the same place he went boating to fish? What do you think?
Well, if you add... Look, nine times out of 10, people that are killed, it's the last person that was with them. They always ask. It's usually the husband, if it's the wife dead, or somebody in the family, somebody close. Who's the closest to Laci, Scott? What's the motive? The motive could be that he wanted to be with Amber Fry. He didn't like his life. I'll give you another example of somebody that did that. Chris Watts. Chris Watts was married. He had an Amber Fry, killed his wife, and he killed 2 of his children, Celeste and Bella, drove them to an oil ditch and just ditched him.
Was that just an unrelated person?
Unrelated person, Chris Watts. So this has happened before where
for sure.
Husbands just look at what they have and they're like, I don't want this anymore.
I mean, you would think you could divorce her. You can confess you're having an affair.
No, you can't think like that. From a psychologist's point of view, they'll tell you that they want a clean break. They don't want to deal with their wife. They don't want to deal with their new son. They want a new family. They want a do-over. And the only way you get a do-over is you got to kill your family.
Holy moly.
Okay, that's from a sociopath point of view. I'm just telling you that's how it works.
Right. So he felt trapped, and he, as a sociopath, he decided, I'm going to murder my wife, my unborn child. I'm going to fake
That's the argument.
I'm going fishing. Really, I'm dumping the body.
That's the prosecution's argument. The defense's argument, Geragos was saying, no, he might have been a bad guy and he may have not wanted to be with her, but there's no evidence that he wanted her dead. And that's all he rested on, that there's no evidence that he wanted her dead. In fact,
there's evidence of potential other crime that was taking place nearby, and another motive of her having witnessed a burglary and them wanting to off her.
Well, he tried to get that in, and the jury rejected that argument, by the way. And even right now, when the jurors were asked after it hit the news, what do you think about this? They said, we still think he's guilty. And then when they said, well, what did you think about the Innocence Motion Project? And one juror said, well, that's fine. If it's found innocent, then that's just the way the system works. But I think he's guilty.
Wow.
He's not budging off of that because there was so much evidence against him.
I feel like the Innocence Project has a certain reputation. Is there a threshold of things they need to see, new evidence they need to see to take it on? Or do they sort of cast a wider net in the hopes of saving some innocence? In other words, did they pre-filter this and go, wow, we really think Scott's got a winning case to take it on? Or should we not really read much into that because, hey, they got to take on 100 cases to save one innocent?
First of all, I'm going to correct myself. I don't know if Scott's guilty. I said before, I think there was a lot of evidence. As a criminal defense attorney, I'm a little jaded. I always think there's never enough evidence.
We know that he's been convicted.
So I'm going to respect the jury's decision. They heard the evidence. Geragos believes it was a wrong call. Do I think it's a wrong call? That's hard to tell because there's so much motive, right? The guy's lying about his Amber Fry. He's lying to his pregnant wife. He's a scumbag at the very minimum. So of course you don't want to give him the benefit of the doubt. You know, I'm being honest. As a criminal defense attorney, I don't like him. And you've got to go beyond that. As a juror, you got to step out of that shoe of hating him in order to see whether or not he really killed her.
Right, because lying and cheating on your wife do not equate to murder. And certainly not murder of your own child.
Unless your boat is where the body was found. And then you could raise a question to, maybe you killed her or maybe you didn't kill her.
So was that the only evidence that the bodies later arrived where he had said he was boating?
No, he also talked to Amber Fry and he used her name in past tense before anybody knew she was dead.
Laci's name.
Yeah. And he never mentioned it to Amber Fry. He said, I don't have a wife. Now that could be deemed as, well, he didn't want her to know.
Of course.
But using it in past tense, that's a
little mental sort of like
could be a slip up.
Slip up.
There was other evidence too, by the way. What about the flight risk? The guy takes $15,000 cash. He dyes his hair brown or blonde. He heads for San Diego, towards the San Diego border, and they bust him. Why is he dyeing his hair blonde? Why does he have $15,000 cash? Why does he have passports? I think he had a fake passport. Why is he heading down there? Why does he look different? These are all things. And again, is it possible that Scott's still innocent? Because maybe he thought, and I know if I had Mark on the show, he'd say, well, did you ever think that the guy who's being railroaded, so he didn't want to go to prison for 20 years?
Right.
And Mark would say, I would have done the same thing. I would have dyed my hair blonde and went to Mexico until the government figured it out.
But how many of Mark's clients actually do that?
Does anybody do that? How many innocent people do that? That's the question. To get back.
I remember OJ doing it.
Well, OJ was never found innocent.
No, but he was driving towards the border, wasn't he?
He was in the Ford Bronco with his buddy.
With passports and ski masks.
Yeah, and that was used against him in the flight risk. Yeah. And they argued that, yes, of course he was suicidal. He thought he was going to be guilty. Nobody wants to go to jail. He thought the world was crumbling. So that's what I'm going to do as a criminal defense attorney. I'm going to twist it around, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the problem was there was a lot more evidence that, not only that, he was not liked by the press, like you said. He took positions of, I'm not going to answer that question. My lawyer told me this. It's just not the psychopathy is not there for a police officer to discern whether or not you're actually innocent or not. You're acting as though you are guilty. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because normal people would say, come in, I'll help you and do that, and be more informative and sit down and talk to them. But he was very aloof, cold, and
stoic.
But again, that doesn't mean that he killed her.
He didn't do himself any favors though, acting that way. People did not like him because of the way he sat still and just was expressionless and in the courtroom.
Yeah. So and what are the odds now? You're asking me that he's
but 12 peers, 12 random people have to agree he murdered his wife and child. They were convinced.
Yeah, but you know what? Since 2020, 375 people have been freed by the Innocence Project.
For murder?
For murder. On death row, half of them. And the jury were convinced. And the number one reason they got convicted? Eyewitness testimony. And 60, 70% of eyewitness testimony is garbage. And by the way, they had garbage science in this case. They had cadaver dogs, supposedly, that smelt, her scent. And now they're admitting that that's BS science. It's junk science. Shit. Cadaver dogs that picked up the scent. And that led the jury. And the prosecution didn't give a lot of video and audio tape. They held back. I read the motion. It's insane how much they have held back. So
let me ask a dumb question. Did Scott testify?
No.
Was that the right move? Obviously, in hindsight, it wasn't. But would you have done that differently?
Absolutely. I'm sure even Mark's looking at it saying, now that I know what I know, I would have put him on the stand and I would have had him explain, look, Mark told me not to testify. Of course, I love my wife. I'm sorry about my stoic behavior. That's just the way I process it. I break down and cry at 3 o'clock in the morning, but by 6, I'm stoic. I did have an affair. I'm a piece of crap. I don't deserve anybody, but I didn't kill her. That would have won the case.
Really?
I think so. Wouldn't you have been convinced?
I find it compelling.
You would have got
honest.
1 or 2 people to say, you know what?
He was honest.
He was super honest.
He was vulnerable.
And I would attack.
He admitted to something.
And the strategy would have been, I would have told Scott, when you talk about yourself, I want you to attack yourself and say what a piece of crap you are. So as Scott, I would say, I'm such a piece of crap. I don't deserve this. So that the jury.
And that would have won over 1 juror.
100%.
At least
I've done 76 jury trials. I'm guaranteeing you would have got 1 juror to feel bad for Scott and hang that jury. The fact that he wasn't on the stand, in my opinion, means, and I'm just speculating, that they probably did a go run. They always do a run together.
For sure, yeah.
And there were problems with the case that Scott couldn't just explain, and they just didn't want to take that chance.
Right. That was probably, I'm assuming, like the legal teams, namely Mark Garagos.
Pat Harris, Mark Garagos.
Expert opinion as to the viability of this witness to defend themselves.
And to a certain extent, I completely believe that Mark thought that he didn't need it. He probably was going to just say, this is not enough. Remember his opening statement? They have nothing. Nada, zip. My client is innocent. There's a problem with that, by the way. I have a problem. I respect Mr. Garagos a lot, but I wouldn't have said it like that, his innocence, because you're raising the bar. I don't know if you know that the prosecution doesn't have to prove
beyond a reasonable doubt.
That's it. So when you say innocence, you're raising the bar. You're making it a lot harder for yourself. All you got to say is this case is not proven. Just because my client doesn't like Laci Peterson, just because my client didn't want to stay married to Laci Peterson doesn't mean he killed her. By saying he's innocent with a guy that's cheating on his wife, could a guy like that be innocent in your opinion? Somebody scummy like that? Could you actually associate him with the word innocent?
No.
So I wouldn't have used that word innocent.
I see what you're saying.
I think Mark didn't sell it right.
I get what you're saying there. Just to sort of clarify it a little bit for everybody at home, the threshold, the burden of proof is on the state, the federal government, whoever, the government, right. In this case, the state, to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he committed the crime. Beyond a reasonable doubt, he murdered her. So let's say let's say you're a juror and they convince you that he probably kills her. That's not enough. You're supposed to say not guilty.
Right.
Because probably is like 51%. That's not enough. It's got to be beyond a reasonable doubt.
How about clear and convincing? How about there's clear and convincing evidence?
I think that's still not enough.
How about if there's more likely than not evidence?
Nope. You're at 51%. You got to get up to beyond a reasonable doubt. So what does that mean?
It means that you have an abiding conviction of the truth of the charge. I tell jurors that what that means is, can you wake up 5 years from now, splash cold water on your face and say, I made that right decision. That guy deserved that conviction.
And be sure of it.
If you're okay with it, then come back and convict my client. That's okay with me. But remember, you're going to have to live with this the rest of your life.
Right. Beyond a reasonable doubt.
That's beyond a reasonable doubt. Not all doubt, logical doubt. Is there logical doubt in this case? Yes, you're right. Scott Peterson has logical doubt, but I believe the inculpatory or the bad negative evidence outweighed whatever he had to show that he most likely didn't do it. And remember, when you're walking into a movie, right?
But it's not even just outweigh. It's got to outweigh by a lot.
Yeah.
Beyond a reasonable outweigh.
I think the overwhelming evidence for the jurors that they could not overcome was where the location of the boat was, and that Scott said he was in that area and the body popped up there.
Why would he say he was there, though?
Well, he couldn't not say. They had reports. He docked there. He picked up a fishing dock. He had a license. he had to go out there. So he was done. They had receipts that he was out there.
Got it.
And then the body's there coincidentally.
Right.
I would be honest with you, if I was a criminal offender and I heard that, I would go back and tell them, look, everybody, the right thing to do is to let him go, even though we don't like him, because he may have done this. He probably did it, but that's not enough.
Right.
And people don't want to do that.
That's
people don't want to say,
it's hard to say
I'm
that.
sorry, if he probably did it, I'm going to vote guilty. But that's not the rule. The rule is probably is not enough. More than likely is not enough. Clear and convincing is not enough.
Right.
Reasonable doubt is not enough. It's got to be beyond a reasonable doubt. Beyond, if you have any doubt in your mind that's logical, then you have to ask yourself, you know what? He's still presumed innocent. I'm going to give it to you. You're supposed to give him that get out of jail free card. But most people don't want to do that.
Are we kind of saying no doubt?
No, not no
We're
doubt.
not saying no doubt.
Reasonable doubt.
Beyond reasonable doubt.
Right.
More than reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
Other than more than reasonable doubt. Yeah,
It's an abiding conviction. You have in your mind, you have an abiding conviction that the charge is true. It's a simple question. If you believe that they have proven their case beyond a reasonable, another way you could do it beyond a reasonable doubt. So in a car accident case, it's 51 to 49%, right? In California, if you tip the scale.
That's beyond a preponderance of
That's
the
preponderance
evidence.
of the evidence,
That's
right?
more likely than not.
Yeah. So
It's probably.
Clear and convincing would be like 3/4 of the cup, and then maybe beyond a reasonable doubt would be like 80% to 90%.
So we go from probably, that's going to be 51%, to
Maybe
likely, which is 75%,
Right.
to
probably,
most likely,
most likely,
more than likely,
probably,
beyond likely.
not probably, clear and convincing, which is an actual standard in evidentiary law. That's what it takes to bring something in. And then the mother of all of them, it's the highest level of certainty required under law.
I'm going to guess it's beyond a reasonable doubt.
It's the highest level.
Nothing higher than that.
Nothing higher. Because they'll tell you it's better to let that man go if you have any doubt than to let a innocent person go.
Right.
And that's what but the thing is, if you don't like the guy, right, if you think he's just scummy, are you going to give him that break? And I think that's why there's a lot of psychology behind the Peterson case. And I would be fascinated to know if that DNA isn't his, it would completely change, in my opinion, the criminal justice system. You know what's going to happen if that happens?
Tell me.
I'm going to make a prediction. They're going to implement psychology as a part of police training. And they're going to show Peterson as a prime example of how something could go wrong if you're profiling or you're seeing reactions of which you think is suspicious.
Confirmation bias.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they're going to do that if that happens, but that's a tall order. I mean, there was a lot of evidence.
There was a little fact in the case where he had gone to the boating dock and I don't know, he had done something, occurrence A, and he had kept the receipt.
Right.
And then the investigator asked him like, oh, you kept that receipt? And then the investigator found that suspicious.
Yeah.
But then later he had left the boating dock and had not kept that second receipt for the exit. And then the investigator was like, oh, you didn't keep that receipt, and found that suspicious. So I was like, how could you find both suspicious? It's confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias.
You want to convict him.
Yeah. And also it's when you have that confirmation bias, you're gathering and collecting evidence towards your bias. You're no longer doing independent evidence.
Right. You might not look at something and look twice at another thing.
Right. Same thing with the Medina case. So these investigators cleared these two meth addicts because in their mind, Scott was guilty. So the Innocence Project is saying, wait a second, you guys got it wrong. You relied on two meth addicts to give you the timeline? What about the van? How come you didn't check? Oh, because they told you so? The meth addicts told you they didn't do it? And why did you go after Scott? Let me guess. Because you didn't like Scott. You knew he was having an affair. You know he was being squirrely with you with the answers. So therefore you went after him. And then you gathered and collected evidence to point to his guilt.
I want to take a cynical view of law enforcement for 1 second.
Yeah.
I love law enforcement.
I do too.
You know this.
I do too.
But I want to take a cynical view just as a thought experiment. If you're close to solving this case, or you feel Scott did this, you see a lot of other cases where the spouse is the one. The person who was last with him is the one. You kind of lean into that past prejudice, let's call it,
right?
Prejudgment. You're like, dude, I'm almost done with this case. And like now you got somebody talking to you about burglars across the street and you're like, I'm not even trying to hear that. Like, no, I got my guy. Like, leave me alone. I'm being cynical. But is there a part of that where they don't want to do the extra work? They don't want to uncover another piece of paper?
It's not because they're lazy.
That's another weekend away from their wife and kid.
It's not because they're lazy. It's because they believe, whether it's arrogantly or whether it's confidently, that they have their guy because of this profile, this confidence bias that you said.
Yeah,
this
but you got this
bias.
alternate potential suspect. Are you not going to do a deep dive and look into him?
Well,
Maybe not. You're not that passionate.
Well,
about
so the Innocence Project wants that info. I'm interested in seeing if they passed the polygraph, what they told him. We're going to get that info. According to them, they did not give that information to Garagos, Scott's attorney, who needed that information.
What information?
The information regarding the Medina burglary. He never got the polygraph examination results, which are not admissible. But if they lied, wouldn't you want to know as a defense attorney?
Is polygraph just not admissible ever?
It's usually not admissible. In federal court, it's very hard to get in. You could get it in federal court.
Is it kind of persuasive, but it's also kind of a joke?
Well, if it's a joke unless you use the proper people. The only people that I believe that are the proper polygraph examination experts are Federal Bureau of Investigation polygraph examiners. Jack Tremarco was my polygraph examiner.
They're literally good at their job.
They're the best.
So if I was taking a polygraph and I was just nervous,
yes, they never take that into account.
It wouldn't show up.
You know why? If you were super nervous and I put you on a stage with 1 million people and I ask you your name, do you think the polygraph is going to say you're lying? If you're super nervous and you say, my name is Tony?
That's a good question.
No.
I presume it's not. So
No.
it's somehow more complicated. It's more nuanced of an assessment.
They basically, and I've been a part of polygraph examination, so they basically measure, it's like a thermometer. They measure where you lie, how high the needle jumps, and where you tell the truth. So tell me your name. Your name is Tony. Now tell me you lie. Tell me your name is Martha. And then the needle jumps up. Mm-hmm. Okay? So now they gauge how you lie.
Unless I'm an amazing actor and I can convince myself my name is Martha at the moment I say
that's different.
Right?
So there are
now I'm like
absolutely
an amazing actor.
A sociopath could be the polygraph.
Well, what about Brad Pitt? He's not a sociopath. He's just a good actor.
I'm not sure how that would work. That's a different show. But I could tell you that if you have sociopathic behavior, yeah, of course, because if you believe in the lie, then you could actually pass the examination. Because
good liars believe in the lie that they're telling.
Sometimes they're fooled into the lie themselves. They believe it, and therefore there's no distinction between reality and fantasy. So it's very hard to do that.
It's just that they forget later. That's the problem. They get caught in it. Yeah, that's a different issue. But
so going
back to here, these two guys burglarizing the home across the street were polygraphed.
And there were independent interviews conducted with independent witnesses who confirmed supposedly their alibis, their audio and recordings, and witness transcripts, which Mark Garagos never got.
Whose alibis?
The alibis of Stephen Todd and Dodd Glenn Pierce. So basically, the Modesto police never gave this information to the defense.
So it's more of an alibi for Scott Peterson?
No, it's an alibi for them. But why did they rely on their alibi? Defense should have got this information.
Right.
At the very least, the defense should have said, let me take a look at it. Why do I have to trust you in deciding that, oh yeah, they're not involved? Maybe you messed up.
It's like the fox guarding the hen house.
That's right.
What, are you going to police yourself?
That's right.
So you don't give the defense attorney a chance to poke holes into this potential witness's lies?
Right. And the police officers testified essentially, well, we believe them. They weren't involved in it. So the jury took that into account.
I said potential witness, potential suspect.
Suspects, yes. So,
wow.
So the jury didn't get to hear all of it. But here's the thing. He's not going to get a retrial. Even if they find the blood of Laci, the only way Scott gets freed is through innocence, not through a retrial. He cannot make an argument, by the way, we found some new evidence, let's do it over again.
Why not?
Because he's had that opportunity.
Right, but there's new evidence.
Only if the newly discovered evidence couldn't be discovered at the time, he's got to make a show that there's no way he could discover it. That's
like new technology.
New technology. And this, now I think the Innocence Project is saying, they're backdooring this. They're saying, although we've litigated this before about the Medina and everything else, we want you to give it to us anyway, because now we believe there's DNA evidence that shows he's innocent. But let me stop you right now.
Can I say that's got to be the best argument for new technology is DNA evidence.
Yeah.
Now you can probably read into DNA strands in ways you never could have in 2003, 4, 5.
Right. But they're not saying that Scott, they know that Scott is innocent. They're saying that there's a high possibility based on the lack of DNA investigation. But here's another thing I want you to know. If the Innocence Project is wrong, this is a big black eye for them. They're going to lose credibility, in my opinion, but because they're known for taking on truly innocent people,
right.
It'll seem like almost like a publicity stunt in a way for 501c, which is their nonprofit organization. They might see it as that, and this may really tarnish their reputation. So I'm hoping for Scott Peterson's case and for the Innocence Project's case, they're able to determine his innocence. Otherwise, every commentator that you've talked about has no clue, including myself, why they're doing this. No idea why they're taking on the case.
Really?
Yeah, because even if the blood is there, it doesn't mean that Scott is ruled out. It's got to be her blood and either Stephen Todd Pierce or the other person that was with him that I mention.
Well, their blood will be there. It's their van.
But it's got to be next to...
Not blood, their DNA.
Well, the DNA's got to be close to enough for them to determine that they made contact with Laci, right?
Yeah. Well, no, I think if you find out Laci was in that van, which belonged to them, that's enough for me. I don't need to know that they made contact with Laci. She's in their van.
Right.
That's a lot.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yes.
That starts.
And the van was burnt on top of it.
The van was burnt. That starts me thinking that an innocent man could have been sitting in prison for 20 years.
Yes. And like I said, if this happens, it'll be the greatest injustice case. There'll be movies about it. It'll be like The Fugitive almost.
I mean, let's steelman his case for 1 sec. There's zero evidence. Mark Geragos was correct in saying there's nada. Zero evidence other than a verbal misstep that he took where he said past tense about her name somehow. We're not sure how. And he had an affair. That's not evidence of murder. So,
yeah, his argument was basically he told the jury in the opening statement that they're just going to character assassinate Scott Peterson and they want you to find him guilty just based on that.
Right.
And when he said the no, nada, zip, nothing argument, he meant it. He meant it as there's nothing. There's no evidence of any no DNA evidence, no other circumstantial evidence other than the fact that Scott didn't want to stay married.
I find another thing.
And some suspicious activity, which we don't know if it's suspicious or not, because we told you, we're not psychologists. Everybody reacts differently. Everybody speaks differently, right?
I'm not even sure if he did. We don't know that he didn't want to be married. He may just be that he had an affair. And some people have an affair and still want to be married. I think
Amber Fry testified that he wanted to be with her. He wanted to make a long-term commitment.
That's what he would have told her though, right?
Maybe, yeah.
Because she was like a side thing for him.
Are you familiar with Chris Watts, the case of Chris Watts also?
I'm not.
You get a chance, check that out. It's the same exact fact pattern.
We can do another podcast on that.
Yeah.
Coming back to this for a sec, further steel manning him. It's interesting to me that that Laci's family, her maternal family. What's her maternal last name? I don't know.
I think she's from Portugal.
So Laci's,
she's Portuguese.
I believe her dad.
She had a Spanish last name.
Her sister are very supportive of Scott. Like I heard phone calls today researching this of them calling him in prison. Hey, buddy, hang in there. They're very supportive of him. They don't believe he killed their daughter.
You know what happened recently? A prison guard listened to a conversation and where there was an admission that there was somebody that knew about the Laci Peterson murder. And then they interviewed that person regarding it.
That's straight out of Shawshank.
It's all in the actual the documents that Innocence Projects are trying to get.
Wow.
And also, just so you know, there was a call to the police indicating a tip that they saw a pregnant lady being thrown into a van. Okay, this is in the motion also. They want that information. They want that 911 call. They want that report. They want to know what she saw. And there were several people that saw a pregnant lady, not just one. According to the Innocence Project, several, I could read off the names, that saw an innocent person in that area walking a dog near the park. One person saw him being grabbed. One person said they saw him arguing. So if you put all the pieces of the puzzle together,
that's crazy.
It could be possible that Scott's innocent. That maybe this person was abducted on that day and the dog took off. And maybe Scott is a scummy guy, but maybe he didn't kill his wife.
I could buy that. I could be persuaded, I think, by the right facts. Are you persuaded just by the fact that they took this case on and you know them to be of incredible reputation? You know them to have... Yes. Do they choose wisely?
Very, very wisely.
That should be persuasive.
Very persuasive.
That means they know what they're doing.
This will be the first time that the Innocence Project has been dead wrong.
If it's wrong.
If it's wrong. This will be a high-profile dead wrong case. And, it's fine. I'm happy they're doing it. They should do it because Scott didn't, in my opinion, get all the checks and balances. And for the justice system, this is great because now we could say we did everything for him.
I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, we're doing above and beyond now. Scott Peterson's getting something that most defendants don't get across America. They're getting excellent legal representation. They're getting DNA work. They're getting people like us to talk about it. So he's doing a good job keeping it out there.
But I feel like everybody, even after conviction, would deserve to get that, right? A second look with better technology. Should that be something that we just work at? I mean, I think it's also good for our system just to have, to get attacked and to have to prove itself to be up to par. Like it's good. Questioning, cynicism, like poking holes in the system, which is what the Innocence Project is doing. I mean, how is it that 300 or more people have been found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt by a jury of their peers?
Most of them have been eyewitness testimony.
Meaning what?
Meaning I saw him. He was there. They're convinced. I saw you,
And
Tony.
somebody's either lying or just wrong.
It's reinforced misidentification.
But
It's a
that's-
whole psychology.
There's a whole thing. We know that the brain creates patterns that make you recognize faces even when they're not there.
That's not only that. It's if you see somebody, let's just say I saw you. A quick story, I had a robbery and two of my clients, I was representing two kids. The people swore it was my clients, but they looked like the same kids down the block that ran past them.
Yeah.
But they swore it was my client. Swore.
Right.
Okay, now months and pass by. They come and they take the stand and they don't know anymore. And I got them off. So, and then later on, I found out who the true robbers were. We brought them into court. They were arrested. So it was complete misidentification.
Did they look alike?
Oh, almost twins. I mean, there were two chubby Hispanic guys.
Yeah.
Both of them wearing gold chains. Both of them wearing black. The other
Generally-
one was a skinny kid. The other one was a skinny kid.
Similar looking.
Very similar. This stuff happened. So if it wasn't for a guy like me that was really on top of it, right? They would have got convicted. Eyewitness testimony, it happens all the time.
But it goes even deeper. Like sometimes you're walking in a crowded space and you look out, I don't know, 50 meters in front of you and you're certain you recognize someone. You're like, oh my God, I didn't know he or she was here. Wow. Oh my. And as you get closer, you're like, no, that's not them at all. Like your brain does fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
There is a psychology to perception and what you think you saw, how you could convince yourself you saw a guy in a red jacket pulling a boat and really it was something completely different. But you can convince yourself. But
and that's why the Innocence Project is taking us, because they know they're not taking it for the misidentification. They're taking it because of sloppy police work. If you read this motion, they tear apart the Modesto police.
Really?
They tear apart the prosecution's office. I mean, they basically say the whole thing was rigged. I mean, essentially, that's what the motion says. You didn't give the defense this. You automatically assume Scott was this. And the whole thing was rigged from the get-go because you didn't like Scott.
So is that one of the avenues by which they can actually get him off, is by showing bad police work? Or is it negligent police work? Is it malicious police work?
He can't get off on any of that.
What if he's framed? They can't get him off?
Too late.
Really?
The only thing that he could do, he's expired all his legal options. The courts have already gone through that and they have disagreed. The only thing that he could do now is prove his innocence, which the Innocence Project is trying to do right now.
So that's the one way you can actually come back at it, is to say, I'm going to prove Does the burden shift? Of course.
No, the burden only shifts upon finding the evidence. And if you disclose the DNA is somebody else other than Scott Peterson, then you would give it to the experts of the prosecution. And if they concur, then it's over. It's game over.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's
Where
not
are
really,
we at?
I don't like to say it's burden shifting. I'm just saying it's your duty. It's your not burden, but it's your responsibility to show that the DNA is actually what it is. Wow. So what they're going to do essentially is they're going to prove it's not Scott's, excuse me. And then once they do that, then they're going to go up to the DA and say, look, here's what it is. You test it. If you believe that Scott wasn't involved now because we have other DNA showing that somebody else touched her and it was in a van and these guys have not been interviewed, then the prosecution's now going to scratch their head, go back to the Modesto police and say, I want to see the Medina burglary file. I want to take a look. And why did you trust those meth heads anyway?
Why would the prosecution be incentivized to do that?
Great question. So there's something called Brady material. And in California, there's new laws that make the justice system better. They're supposed to disclose anything that's bad for the government. It's called US v. Brady. And Brady basically says, if you don't disclose this information to the defense, your case gets tossed. We don't care if he's guilty. You could kill 6 people. If you don't give Scott Peterson and his lawyer the Brady material, like the Medina burglary, your case gets tossed. Now, they tried to get this before, and the judge ruled that it's not admissible, it's irrelevant, whatever. They're not trying to backdoor this now. They're only focusing on the DNA. And the reason why all of this is in the motion is they're explaining the broader story of how it came to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Here we are 20 years later. This case has resurfaced.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Where are we in that process? So
they filed a motion recently. This was on the news, I think, like last week. And another thing that's interesting is not only did they file it on the 17th of January. Okay, that's when it was filed. What's interesting is everybody that filed it has a state bar number of 2, 3, and above. And just
What does that mean? They're all older, or
they're young.
oh, they're young.
I mean, 3-1-1 is young. 3-3-4 is really young.
Okay.
2-3 is pretty young. I'm 2-1-9. So everybody, I mean, most of these people are young people.
I have no idea what mine is. I'll have to look it up.
Yeah. Well, the reason these numbers stick out of my mind, you don't see old numbers here. So I'm wondering, do we just have really enthusiastic young lawyers that want to make a name for themselves?
Who don't know what they're doing, or
Maybe, well, no, I think they know what they're doing. I will tell you, this 463-page motion that I read was fantastically written.
awesome. I take it back. I don't know.
Kudos to Paula Mitchell, Eliza Haney, Paige McGrail.
Nice
Hillary
job,
Morgan.
guys. Nice
Excellent job. Yeah.
Nice job.
But yeah, absolutely amazing. But will they actually?
This is part of the Innocence Project.
Yeah.
That's why they're younger. That's why
they're super young and they're excited. You know,
that's who you're getting probably to come to work for you at the Innocence Project, which is amazing and admirable and awesome.
And they
full of energy.
And they believed Scott. They've met with Scott. They believe him, and they believe that he's innocent.
That's so cool.
Now, what's interesting is what happens if they can't figure out if he's innocent. That you know, it could be in limbo still, right? They could pull the DNA and not find anything. Number one. One option is it's a bust. We did all this work and we can't find DNA. Option 2 is we found DNA, but it's inconclusive. That's a possibility. Option 3 is we found the DNA, but only Laci Peterson with no other identifiers, DNA identifiers. Other possibilities is cross.
That would be big because that would put Laci
at the van. But the best would be a cross DNA marker of Pierce or Todd, these other two burglars. That would put the nail in the coffin. That would really mean, in my mind, that these people abducted Laci and killed him, and it would give credence to Scott Peterson's assertion.
What's the timeline here?
You know, these things take time. It could take months. It could take a year. There's so many. I'm gonna go off on a limb and I'll predict something. I think it'll take another year or two.
And what do you think will happen?
I don't know. I don't know what the DNA is going to show, but I will tell you that I wouldn't be surprised if the prosecution says we don't have a lot of the things you're asking for because it's so old and it's gone. So I think his Hail Mary pass, as they say in football, is the DNA.
That's what we're watching right now.
Yeah. And I don't even know why they're going after, all this other stuff. Fine. But if I was them, I would hone in exclusively on getting that order, trying to see if that DNA matches or not match. And then maybe they could file more motions after that and say, look, now we found out that Laci could be in there if there's some sort of identifying marker. Maybe put more pressure on the judge, or maybe that'll be enough for them to drop the case. I don't know. Either way, this would be the greatest injustice if that was the case to Scott Peterson. It would be the biggest black eye. And as a criminal defense attorney, I would be using this as every example from now on. Whenever somebody says, oh, come on, how can that possibly happen? I'll just point to the Scott Peterson case.
No, that would be bad. That would be bad. It would be bad. And on the other hand, it would be an incredible sort of like revisit on it would be a correction. It would be a late correction to an injustice that had been done. Isn't that in itself a testament to the justice system? The fact that the Innocence Project can actually come out, resurface something, and actually exonerate a man who's innocent. I know that's way too late for Scott Peterson if that happens, but in the bigger scheme of the gears turning, it helps us be better, right?
Yeah, and actually, not to tout my own feathers, but that actually happened to me. I proved the guy that was innocent. I'll tell you a quick story. The only time I've ever done that.
Wild.
I actually had the judge throw the case out and said, you're actually innocent. The guy was in jail. I was walking by, and he just flagged me down. He waved at me, and I said, hello. I'm not supposed to speak to him because he has a lawyer, but he said, I don't have a lawyer. I need a lawyer. Can I talk to you?
Okay.
And I just gave him a friendly consultation. I said, okay, what's going on, Chief? He told me he's been in jail for a year, and he doesn't know why. That he's been accused of carjacking. It wasn't him. Typically, everybody says that, right? It wasn't me. It wasn't me. But let me tell you, this was a big guy. Big. He looked like he could be a hardcore gangster.
Okay.
And what hit me is I've got a good radar in my heart. I'm able to detect whether or not you're bullshitting me or not. Okay. I felt like in his heart, he was telling me the truth. And when he started to cry,
you bought it.
That was it. When he started to cry, gangsters don't cry. Okay. Innocent people cry that had been in jail for a year.
Listen up, everybody.
So that touched my heart. I went back. I pulled his report. I went through everything and checked this out. I put an all points bulletin, so to speak, on Facebook. All his friends, shot it on there. Anybody know where this guy was on this day? Okay. I got a hit back from Facebook. His ex-girlfriend contacted me. I was with him that day. I remember we rented a car. They were going out. I don't know. It was a special day or something.
Boom, alibi.
Now, alibi. I got her to come to court. I got a declaration from her. She signed it under oath. She was there when the car got pulled over. She even knew who the person was that was driving the car. It wasn't her boyfriend. It was somebody else that looked like him. She was present during that time. It wasn't him. I filed a fingerprint motion to see a DNA motion to see whether the DNA matched. It didn't match. And her declaration was granted, and I got the case dismissed.
Damn.
His name is Francisco. We sued the police, and we got a lot of money.
Shout out Francisco.
Yeah, Francisco, how you doing, buddy? Hope you're well.
Way to go, waving down RJ Manueli and
So-
walking by in the cell block.
I know. It felt so good to get him out. And when I have a picture of him actually. Him and his girlfriend. We walked out of court. He hugged me. He was crying. His girlfriend was crying. His mom was crying. I started to cry. This is why I came into the business. Honestly, if I could free 2 people in my life innocent, I've done my job, and I've already freed one truly innocent person.
Right. Some
Now-
would say that's obviously more than enough. Just one.
Just one. I just saved one person from going to prison, and I'm really happy. Going back to Scott Peterson, I hope that he is found innocent, because I'll be honest, I thought he was guilty based on let me rephrase that. I thought that there was enough for the jury to find he was guilty. RJ wouldn't have voted guilty, but I see why the jury found him guilty. But I pray that, he is not innocent, because he is not innocent, because it would be terrible to think he's been in there for 20 freaking years.
Right.
Think about where he is in Sing Sing, getting raped,
We would all
getting
feel
beaten
bad.
up.
We would all feel bad about our system having collectively just brought this result about.
How do we?
Nobody would have wanted this.
How do we rectify him if he is innocent? How do we tell Scott sorry for all those years of torture that we put you through?
Somebody's going to put a price on that, but that's not enough.
Can you bring, even if I gave him 10,
No.
$20 million, is that going to bring back 20 years of his life?
No.
Even $1 billion. Don't you
Time
think Scott
is-
would rather go back in time?
The only non-renewable resource is time.
Yeah, but the one good thing that could come out of Scott Peterson, there could be new laws, just like Megan's law.
Right.
There could be the Peterson law.
If
Where,
it makes us better as a system, as a society, as a legal justice system, yes, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
We're evolving. We're the best in the world. Let's be real.
and that's why I'm really excited about this motion. This motion is either going to expose the biggest crack in the criminal justice system that I've seen in a very long time. And if that happens, there's going to be reform, or Scott's guilty.
What would that crack be? What
The
would-
crack is that the innocence motion finds DNA markers that shows it was some other person, or that Laci was in that van.
Right.
And then Scott's case gets dismissed.
How many more cases get opened on the back of that?
Well, there's
Is it like
hundreds of other cases.
Another 1,000 cases are opened up because there's a burnt out van somewhere that now is accessible to DNA, which 10, 20 years ago was not because of technology.
There's an innocence project in every state, and there's thousands of cases going on like this. And I told you there 2% conviction error rate or something I read. And if that's true, that's 20,000 people right there.
Wow.
20,000 innocent people. And there are people that have been executed that have been later posthumously after death found to be innocent. And 90% of those have been African Americans based on misidentification. Terrible. So I'm hoping that this is not true, but it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't.
Sounds like if this turns out to be a false conviction, there's an avalanche of false convictions that are waiting to be unearthed.
Well, there is currently, forget about Scott Peterson. Right now, there are other people at bat. If you go on the Innocence Project website, you'll see how many people have been freed.
Fair. Yeah.
And still right now, people are going to be freed.
Right.
But remember, what
That's a great thing.
But the reason they initiate is because they believe in the client. That's what's fascinating. So going back to Francisco, I've never met Scott Peterson. Mark has. Mark said he was innocent. When I met Francisco, he's the only client I could tell you that I could think of right now that was innocent. Criminal defense attorneys know when we talk to somebody who's not guilty, where you think, okay, this guy's not guilty, we could get him off.
Right.
And then somebody that's truly innocent.
Right.
And that happens like a few times. I've had civil rights cases where my clients have been framed. Other than that, this Francisco guy, he was
Truly innocent.
truly innocent. Like
a
the
good
fingerprints
person.
didn't match.
Right.
He wasn't even there.
Right.
We had fingerprints that matched somebody else.
Right.
And on top of all that, his girlfriend said it was another guy who incidentally got arrested after the fact.
Right, right.
And even the cop, I forgot to tell you, Tony, even the cop came to court and said he might have made a mistake when we showed him the 2 pictures of who it could be compared to who it was.
Right.
And he said on the stand, I'm okay to let him go. It may have been a mis-ID. He said that on the stand.
Ouch. How long did he do time?
He did about a year.
Oh, even that's a lot. I mean, that stings. But 20 years for Scott Peterson or more.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
We'll be watching.
Yes, sir.